Hello, ladies and gents. Hope you're doing well. Today, we'll be talking about something that isn't talked about a lot but probably deserves a lot of attention, and that is how to take care of the mind. When we talk about being healthy, a lot of people are quick to talk about their bodies, but probably important, just as important, or even more important, is learning how to take care of the mind. Failure to take care of the mind leads to a lot of mental or mind disorders, and the World Health Organization has estimated that about 13% of individuals worldwide are suffering from some form of mind disorder. But let's put this in perspective, nearly 1 billion people are suffering from some form of mind disorder. And guess what? The number continues to rise at an exponential rate. Failure to take care of the mind will lead to mind disorders like anxiety, depression, dementia, schizophrenia and other psychosis, and even developmental disorders. While there's an established science on how you can look after your bodies, there's probably not a lot of information out there on how you can take care of your mind. So in today's video, we'll be sharing some insights on how you can take care of your mind. So stay with me. Welcome to the Passion and Purpose of. My name is Tunde Kukoyi, and this is the channel where we share useful knowledge to help you maximize your passions and your purpose so you enjoy not just success but also fulfillment in your lives. In his classic book, As a Man Thinketh, James Allen said, the man's mind may be likened to a garden that can be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. And whether cultivated or neglected, it must and it will bring forth. I'll repeat that ending again. Whether it's cultivated or neglected, it must and it will bring forth. I totally love and agree with this analogy of the human mind to a garden because it provides us with an easy framework on how we can look after our minds. If you had a garden, I'm sure you would want to protect your garden, you want to nurture it, and you want to make sure you grow beautiful plants and flowers so it grows into a beautiful place. And that's kind of the same approach we're going to take with the mind today. We're going to talk about how to protect the mind, how to nurture the mind, and how to grow your mind. So how do we protect our minds? Famous personal development speaker Jim Rohn once said, "Every day, stand guard at the door of your mind." Now, does this mean that you should be in front of your mind with a sword like the guards you see in the epic movies trying to protect a castle or a kingdom? The answer is yes. It means that you should be extremely cautious of what you let into your mind, what you consume. Is the door of your mind very selective as to what you let in, or is it just open and unfiltered, allowing anything and everything to come in? Too many of us have unconsciously let down our guards as to what we let into our minds. You might say, well, it doesn't affect me, but as James Allen said, remember, whether it's cultivated or is neglected, it must and it will bring forth. If you constantly feed your mind with negative content, the end product can only be things like fear, worry, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, violent thoughts. Now, some early signs that you've unconsciously let down the guard of your mind will be that you'll start manifesting what they've called the cancers of the mind: comparing, complaining, and criticizing. Do you constantly find yourself comparing yourself with others, asking why they have more than you or why they've gone way ahead of you? How about complaining? Do you complain about everything? Your spouse, your business, your job, the economy, the weather, the government? How about criticizing? Do you criticize people in front of or behind them? I'd like you to check with yourself. If this is what you're doing on a regular, then it means that you need to re-examine what you're letting into your mind. If you ask me, what then should I let into my mind? The best answer that I'll be able to give you will be from a popular Bible verse that says that you should focus your mind on things that are honest, things that are pure, things that are true, things that are lovely, things that are admirable. I think these are the kind of things that you should let into your mind. Let's move on to talking about nurturing the mind. Back in school, when I studied agricultural science, I remember vividly how we talked about some processes that help to make sure that your soil is in the top nutritious state for producing the best plants. We talked about processes like fallowing, we talked about plowing, we talked about avoiding a lot of chemicals like pesticides and fertilizers. And I'm also going to use this as the way to talk about how you nurture your mind. Now, we'll talk about a couple of processes that can help to make sure that your mind is in a top performing state and the output is always top notch. Now, the first one I'll be talking about is exercising. Now, exercising is the effects of exercise on the mind cannot be overstated. I don't know why some people have postulated that it improves the blood supply to the brain, and exercise also helps to release endorphins, which are natural feel good substances. The effects of exercise, even in people that have been labeled as clinically depressed, have been proven time and time again. In one of the studies, it was found that people that exercise had less need for medications like antidepressants. So imagine if you incorporated exercise into your daily or your weekly routine. Imagine the benefits that you're doing for your mind. The other thing I'll talk about is getting adequate sleep. Just in the same way that you leave a portion of land to rest for some time so that it can regain the necessary nutrients for planting, that is what sleep does to the mind. Sleep helps the body to recover from mental stress and make sure that your mind recovers. Now, imagine how you feel when you don't get one day of sleep, how twitchy, irritable, very on the edge you feel. Now, add this all up to a lifetime of chronic sleep deprivation. Chronic sleep deprivation has been shown to lead to things like anxiety and depression, reduced memory function, and even psychiatric disorders. So I think that in today's age, a lot more people are getting less sleep because you are constantly hyper alert, looking for the next big thing on social media, looking for the next big piece of news, scanning people's status updates. But we need to incorporate a sleep routine. Make sure you get good and adequate sleep if you want your mind to recover. The last thing I'll be talking about under nurturing your mind is to avoid toxic substances to the mind. Things like alcohol, things like drugs. Just the same way fertilizers and pesticides over time kill and rob soil of its nutrients, that's the same way that these toxic substances affect the mind. In the short term, you might think that it helps with things like fear, anxiety, social isolation, but what they do is that they interfere with the chemicals of the mind that have been called neurotransmitters, and over time they lead to mood disorders like anxiety and depression. So my advice for you is to stay away from these substances as much as possible. Just to recap, the way that you can nurture your mind is to make sure that you exercise regularly, get adequate sleep, and stay away from toxic substances to the mind. Last but not least, let's talk about growing the mind. American author William Burroughs once said that you're either growing or you're dying. So look at this in the context of the mind. The mind is either growing or it's dying. A lot of people think that as we continue to grow older, then the mind begins to slow down, but this is not true. The mind does not stop growing because we get older. Instead, we get older because we stop growing our mind. This might seem like a mind twister. Let me take it slowly again. Our minds do not stop growing simply because we're getting older. Instead, we get older because we stop growing our minds. It's therefore imperative that you continue to find ways to make sure that your mind keeps growing even as you increase in the number of years. Many of the world's famous philosophers, artists, scientists achieved some of their greatest work even well into their old age. For example, Socrates was still learning new languages in his 80s. Michelangelo was still painting in his 80s. Same with Isaac Newton. So what are some of the ways that we can continue to grow our mind? Make sure you always keep your mind active by doing things like learning a new skill, a new sport, a new language, a new activity, reading books that help to grow your mind. It has been shown from several studies that keeping the mind mentally engaged and active helps to reduce the risk of things like cognitive decline and even the risk of developing dementia. So associate and connect with other growth-minded individuals and make sure that you are constantly looking for ways to grow your mind. So in summary, develop a growth mindset. And be careful not to confuse this with being busy. There's a difference between being busy and being productive. So schedule time for growing your mind and schedule breaks for doing the things that you truly enjoy, because that is how your mind will grow. Now, as I begin to wrap up, famous author Brian Tracy, in one of his books, talked about the different forms of wealth. He talked about things like having a lot of money, he talked about connections, he talked about having a lot of time, he talked about physical health. But do you know what he ranked as the highest form of wealth? He said, peace of mind is the highest form of wealth. And I could not agree more. There's no point having all the money, all the time, all the connections, and not having peace of mind. Our minds are our most precious resources, because inside our minds are acres of diamonds. So I encourage you to learn to look after your mind, because that is how you can have peace of mind. Thank you for watching yet another video. I hope I was able to add some value to you. As always, please remember to subscribe and share with someone that can benefit from watching this video. Till we meet again, guys, keep living with passion and purpose. I will see you later.